Look, it seems both the unions and the government are stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Totally. What the government is frightened of is the fact that there's the very extreme likelihood of something like 1 million people going out on strike, and 1 million people in all sorts of different walks of life. And if they were to cave into demands for considerably higher pay, that would, they fear, fuel inflation, which, of course, in the end would hit the poorest anyway. And so they are doing their best to hold the line. But to pick up on what you were talking about earlier about football, in the case of the nurses, I suspect this will be a game of two halves. At this stage, the government is holding firm, but there's no doubt about it that while there isn't that much public sympathy for rail workers, there's a great deal of public sympathy for nurses. They arguably are very much a special case. Remember that during the COVID crisis, everyone was clapping for them. And so they were the sort of the nation's heroines. And indeed, when it came to Prime Minister's questions last week, Keir Starmer fully expected the Prime Minister to announce that, yes, there were going to be further talks. There is a great deal of a backlog here. The government initiated or called for a special report on the state of the NHS by the King's Fund think tank, and very embarrassingly for them, the King's Fund came up with the conclusion that the NHS had suffered a decade of neglect, leading to too few staff, not enough equipment, and too many outdated buildings. Factor into all this the expected huge spike in flu cases. Already they've shot up, which will put even more pressure on the NHS. And it strikes me that while the government might stand firm on a great many other pay claims facing them with the nurses, it would astonish me if at some point they don't compromise.
No matter where the public sympathy lies, actually, with one or the other, it looks, I mean, it's only 5 days, no, it's exactly a week, isn't it, till Christmas Day. It does look as though nothing's going to happen now before Christmas.
Probably not, but I suspect in the new year there will be movement. And I mean, you've got to remember also that their pay award put together by the independent pay review body did its sums many months before inflation spiked to double figures, and even the guy who actually used to run the pay review body has said, look, you know, we need to revisit all this. And so the government is under huge pressure from that sort of source and from a succession of former Tory ministers saying, look, we really have got to basically make the nurses into a special case.